we have our own challenges. I don't think it's fair to say that we have life easier. I mean, we have our own things like cyberbullying. That's something that they never had to deal with. But they say we're narcissistic. I don't think that's necessarily true. We're just a completely different generation that has our own different values and different views on things. And I don't think it's fair to say that we're narcissistic or anything like that, or even ignorant. I've heard that one before. I don't think that one's fair either.
Welcome back to Inside Story. That was Alexa Rogers, a college student in Dallas, Texas. She was highlighting what she sees as the disconnect between her generation and older ones. Still with us as we continue our discussion, Erica Williams, a social impact strategist with EWS Strategies. She's a former appointed member of the World Economic Forum's Global Agenda Council on Social Media. In San Francisco, Ben Berkowitz, CEO and founder of SeeClickFix.com, and from Austin, Texas, Norman Horn, a professional engineer and blogger at LibertarianChristians.com. Erica, how much of a gap is there between how you see and other millennials see your generation and the perception that the older generations have of you being narcissistic, self-absorbed, not really caring about the world around you?
There is a huge, huge gap. And again, this is not just anecdotal, it is research, fact, and data-based. That this generation is the most civically engaged and civically inclined generation in history. The issue is, or I think the challenge that older generations have, is in understanding what that looks like for this generation, right? It may not be the same level of political engagement and involvement. It may look like increased levels of volunteerism, increased levels and new models of philanthropy, but we are certainly not narcissistic, and again, the research shows that, and all of the stories about social entrepreneurs going out. Ben here is a perfect example of someone seeing a problem and fixing it, and I don't think that he is rare, I don't think that I'm rare, or any of us are rare. I think we are the norm in the sense that we had a mission, a passion, and a vision for a way in which we could make this country better and use the tools that were at our disposal, which were certainly different than our parents, to do so.
Ben, there is the research does show, though, that some of the best and brightest from the millennial generation, though, are still headed towards sort of Wall Street and high-paying jobs and not so concerned about benevolence. In other words, I think some of the projects that you're involved in, for example, may be the exception rather than the rule. What can society do to draw more millennials into the type of projects that you and your team are involved in?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and just to piggyback, actually, and contrast Erica's point a bit, you know, our research shows, our data shows that a large number of our user base is actually boomers. And I'll tell you, someone told me yesterday that they were at a community center in Oakland, and a woman was proudly displaying her first smartphone, and she had explained that her son put the first app on the phone, and it was SeeClickFix. So I think, you know, millennials are certainly the early adopters, the digital natives to the internet. That's a huge part of what is creating this engagement. With other millennials and with our parents, I think it's just a matter of time before they see that using these digital devices, speaking up, is not a fruitless activity anymore, that real return is coming on this personal investment of time. And I think with time we will see everyone coming to the table and being more engaged.
And Norm, with time for you, how do you see the institutions essentially existing for the millennial generation, say 20 or 30 years from now?
Well, certainly things are going to change. A lot of it is going to be due to the internet. With respect to, for instance, the church, I find that a lot of our elders, the people in the boomer and even the older generation, are very supportive of those of us who are trying to use technology and new means to enact social change in various ways. And whether that looks like trying to engage in the public square a little differently, local government or larger, or whether that looks like trying to do benevolent type projects, they are interested in seeing what we can do. They have a lot of recommendations for us, and we should respect that wisdom in many cases. But they're willing to give us a chance, and they're willing to let us experiment at times in ways that perhaps they never anticipated. So what I would expect to see happen in the church in the long run is that we try to continue this conversation between these generations and try to come to a better understanding of each other and work towards greater social change over the long term, using the wisdom of all ages in this case, and hopefully with some of our more new technological means that the millennial generation is developing.
Eric, as far as interacting with the federal government, or say even the legislative branch in Congress, do you therefore see, based on the internet technology and the access that people have, much more sort of town halls that are electronic town halls or digital exchanges, or people letting their voices be heard, not by calling members of Congress, but by emailing them or sending them their views.
Absolutely. We're seeing, members' offices really taking advantage of technology in new ways, but it's a slow process. We're talking about a huge institution really trying to adapt technologies in what is a really complicated bureaucracy.
And yet your generation is not very patient when it comes to things that take much time.
I wouldn't say we're not patient. I think what we're seeing, the difference between this generation and previous generations are certainly the ways in which we want to change institutions fall in two categories. One is efficiency. Are we using the best of our resources, the amount of time that we have to get the highest possible result? And I think sometimes in the past, bureaucracy has been an impediment to that, has been an impediment to results. And the second is values that we haven't talked much about here in this conversation, but I do think not greater values, not better values, but perhaps priorities on different values like transparency, like accountability, like tolerance. And I think the combination of technology and efficiency and a value shift will see a dramatic change in many of these institutions we're talking about.
Ben, what would you see in terms of the federal government as an institution? How do you see it working best, say 20, 30 years from now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think our federal government really needs to do a better job at providing access both ways. You know, under this administration, there has been a real effort on transparency, on opening data, on making the federal websites and by nature the different organizations within the federal government more accessible. Where I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done is in also allowing the inputs back in. I think that we need to do a better job, the federal government needs to do a better job at listening and understanding where those touch points are with citizens. I'm not sure that's clear right now, but I do think that's going to become more apparent as we move forward.
And Norm, are you optimistic in the least that the federal government can at least take some steps to get to that vision?
Honestly, I'm not, because our history shows them essentially using crises to ratchet up power for themselves. Even this own shutdown that we've been experiencing and is now coming to an end has really just shown that they're out for creating political theater in order to abscond with power for themselves in various ways.
Erica, any optimism? I was going to say, Erica, any optimism that you have?
I do. I'm optimistic because institutions are both systems and structures and also people. And I think we have to work on changing both at the same time. So as we get young people who are willing to bring new ideas, new technology, and who are willing at some point to step up and run for office and work for federal government, which there are some young people who are doing that. I think the combination of those two forces will see great change.
Erica Williams, the social impact strategist at EWS Strategies, thank you very much. Also in San Francisco, Ben Berkowitz, CEO and founder of SeeClickFix.com, coming to a municipality near you. And Norman Horn, Austin, Texas. You can see some of his writings in the Washington Post. Thank you all very much for joining our program. We appreciate it. And that is it from the team in Washington, D.C., and from me, David Schuster, for now. But you can keep the debate going by logging onto our Facebook page.